Justice Stephen Breyer is expected to formally announce his retirement at an event later today with the president. Now, Breyer is 83 years old.
Gonna watch some news and play some guitar.
For the past 27 years. For Mr. Biden, it means whoever he nominates to replace Breyer could exert a powerful influence over the U.S. judicial system long, of course, after the president leaves office. And with the Senate split 50-50, any nominee is bound to face a strong confirmation battle.
I have a string that keeps going out of tune. I'm gonna have to replace it. B string.
President Biden confronting a major decision about the Supreme Court. Justice Stephen Breyer expected to retire from the highest court, paving the way for the president to nominate his replacement, one of the most coveted and momentous actions a sitting U.S. president can take.
Yeah, it's double off now. Breyer expected to announce retirement on Thursday. It's interesting, I was thinking about that, wondering if he was doing it now to try to help Biden's popularity. Because he could retire anytime between now and the next 3 years, and Biden could still put him in. Or whoever's in office. Put a black woman in there, or anybody in there.
We are putting together a list of a group
so to speak.
of African-American women who are qualified and have the experience to be in the court.
The White House reiterating Biden's position on this front remains unchanged.
The president has stated and reiterated his commitment to nominating black women to the Supreme Court, and certainly stands by that.
Upcoming nomination and confirmation fight now expected to dominate Washington and the White House for weeks. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer looking to move quickly following a similar timeline that Republicans used to confirm conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett in 2020. The political calendar and the upcoming midterm elections looming large over Democrats. The president's party currently has the slimmest of majorities in the Senate, with Vice President Kamala Harris as the tie-breaking vote, this adding urgency for Biden to act quickly before the Senate potentially changes hands.
Mitch McConnell said that if Republicans were to take back the Senate in 2022, he did not see a way that you could get a Supreme Court justice confirmed. Your response to that?
Mitch has been nothing but no for a long time. And I'm sure he means exactly what he says, but we'll see.
Appointed to the court in 1994 by President Bill Clinton, Breyer, a consistent liberal justice on the bench. He has been a defender of abortion rights and affirmative action, as well as a fierce opponent of capital punishment. Breyer also writing the opinion rejecting a challenge to the Affordable Care Act last term. More recently, Justice Breyer coming under intense pressure, including from many progressives, to retire. The 83-year-old justice saying the confirmation process should have nothing to do with politics.
If the public sees judges, politicians, and roads, it's confidence in the court, in the rule of law itself, to me.
Several names already in circulation as possible replacements for Breyer. Among them, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, a former Supreme Court clerk for Breyer.
When you become a judge, you take an oath to look only at the law in deciding.
This decision shouldn't be too hard because the courts are sort of ranked in the United States. The federal courts. There's like different levels of federal courts.
And California
So
Supreme Court Justice
whoever's
Leon
the judge of the most powerful ones. It's kind of an objective thing.
That really conversations about these very difficult cases are confined to a very small number of people.
Now, the White House being asked repeatedly about the Breyer news, but everyone from the president on down essentially staying on message and saying they are not going to comment on the specifics until Justice Breyer himself announces his retirement. MJ Lee, CNN, the White House.
Now, the U.S. Supreme Court has the final word on any legal appeals that come before it, with adherence to the U.S. Constitution as the guiding principle for. Their decisions can directly affect daily lives in America for generations. The court is made up of 9 justices who span really the political spectrum from the left to the right of the other screen. Under former President Trump, 3 right-leaning justices were confirmed, giving conservatives a 6-3 majority. The most recent was Alex Barrett, whose immigration directive pushed through the Senate in less than a month. The 9 justices can choose which cases they will accept to hear, including hot-button issues such as the Texas abortion law and the president's vaccine mandate for large businesses. But there are many other cases
this would be sort of a win for the Democrats because if any justice dies or retires while a Republican is president, or a non-Democrat, then they would get somebody that's not
The idea of bringing a
sympathetic to their party's
holistic approach, having their entirety in themselves being a part of the court, having opportunity to weigh in to the most consequential matters of our lifetime, our parents' lifetime, our children's lifetime, is extraordinarily important, and it should not be lost on anyone. This is not the first time, for example, a president has mentioned what his intentions would be when it comes to someone on the bench. Roe v. Wade comes to mind, trying to have people believe that they'll be able to nominate those justices who could possibly overturn precedent. This notion of what it looks like for a president to be able to figure out what type of justice they want, it seems all of these years, it's always eluded black women. And it is unconscionable, and it makes no sense, given what we know of the wide scope of qualified candidates. And just in those alone who have been named, it's quite extraordinary that it's taken until this point to even have them nominated this level.
President Biden may be on the verge of a win at home, but he's still facing a major international crisis with Ukraine, with Russian troops on the border with Ukraine. The U.S. is waiting for an answer from Moscow after it sends a written response to Russia's request for security guarantees. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says there's a serious diplomatic path forward if Russia chooses to punish it.
We make clear that there are core principles that we are committed to uphold and defend, including Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and the right of states to choose their own security arrangements and alliances. The document is with them, and the ball is in their court. We'll see what we do, as I've said repeatedly, whether they choose the path of diplomacy and dialogue, whether they decide to renew aggression against Ukraine, we're prepared either way.
An advisor to the Ukraine president says the U.S. response to Russia is comprehensive, well thought out, and the right strategy. The top U.S. diplomat in Kiev spoke to CNN about it.
We're trying to make it very clear to Russia right now that if they go in, it will not be easy. I've been here for over 2.5 years, and I've seen Ukrainian troops, Ukrainian National Guard, Ukrainian border guards, where they work. I've gone all around the country, and I can tell you, Ukrainians will fight. Ukrainians love their country, they're patriotic, they will stand, they will fight, and the Russians will not have any easy time of it.
Meanwhile, the Ukrainian diplomat says the country is willing to negotiate around the clock when talks with Russia taking place in Paris ended with both sides supporting the idea of an unconditional permanent ceasefire. Alex Stewart is covering the economic impact of the tensions between Russia and Ukraine. Scott McLean is covering the latest peace talks I was just mentioning in Europe. But we begin this hour with Nick Robertson, the reaction to the US response to Russia. And Nick, let me start on that. What has been the reaction to this letter of guarantees from Moscow? Has it appeased Putin at all?
Zero reaction so far, Lisa. The Kremlin is likely to take some time over this. Yesterday, the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, when he was addressing Parliament, said that he would respect the United States' wishes to keep the contents confidential, that they would consider what was written there. He really warned in very stark terms that this should be something that is not confrontational, that it should be constructive, that the United States should sort of lose some of its aggressive lines that it's been using recently. Otherwise, the Russian government would be facing an alternative response that in the past they characterized as a legal military response. He didn't say that there in the State Duma. But what he did say was that the government and the foreign ministry, which is where the letter was handed over to, officials there would consider what's written.
U.S. delivers written response to Russia on Ukraine. Blinken says NATO rejects Russia's demand to ban Ukraine from alliance.
Very likely from the Kremlin spokesman in the next couple of hours, and may possibly get some hint of what's thinking, of what the government's thinking is. I think the reality is that this process, this piece of diplomacy here, is perhaps not going to play out very fast, and perhaps not all of it in the public domain either.
And I know you'll keep us posted, Nick. Stay with us. And you go to Scott. And Scott, while this letter of guarantee, security guarantee was being handed over, there were
They always get everything ready.
How successful were the trying to diffuse tensions?
Yeah, there were flickers of progress, real baby steps made in these negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, mediated by the French and the Germans. Now, from the French perspective, they were simply just trying to test Russia's willingness to engage, and of course that is a pretty low bar, but in that
I think they might stay in tune eventually. If not, I have other streams. We'll see.
This is the first time since 2019 that all four parties
I wish I knew exactly what made it go out of tune, though.
joint
It might have.
statement at the conclusion of
It
talks.
might have
They
just
say that
gotten
they
bumped.
want to make sure that
But
the ceasefire in
seems like it
eastern
might
Ukraine is
be weather
maintained,
related
and
or
that the Minsk
something else might
agreement that
happen.
brought peace to that region after the invasion
Maybe even
in
a combination of
2014
things. I don't know. All I did was
maintained. Now,
had
there's
it in a
different
bag.
interpretations of that agreement, but at least the parties say that they're
And
willing to
I took it
try
to the shop,
work through
and
those
they
differences.
put
So there's a long way to
a
go
knob
there,
on
but
for
at
me.
least all of these countries are planning to meet up in Berlin in about 2 weeks from now to continue. Now, Berlin is also where the British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace was yesterday, speaking with his German counterpart, and he's on this European tour to try to push European and NATO countries to do more.
Negotiators in Paris signal support for ceasefire.
You know, fend off Russian aggression, sanctions, things like that. And one of the things that they're keen on is sending aid in the form of lethal aid to Ukraine. The Germans are reluctant to do that. They have committed to sending, for instance, 5,000 military helmets to the country, as well as a field hospital and other resources. But they are not interested in sending lethal weapons. They think that that will further fuel the conflict, something they're not interested in doing. Now, another topic that came up was the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The Brits, the Americans, they think that it should be canceled. This is what Ben Wallace said yesterday.
I think Nord Stream 2 is important, and I know the German Chancellor has talked about it being one of the areas that will be under consideration. And I think that if President Putin chose to invade Ukraine and all the consequences, that he should not be rewarded by Europe funding him any further.
Under consideration is how the Germans are framing it if there were to be a Russian invasion, but of course the Americans, the Brits would certainly like to see a firmer commitment from Germany on that. Of course this is all very delicate because the Russians have said that, look, if that pipeline were to be canceled, if they were cut out of the SWIFT banking system, then, well, they would have problems getting paid by Europe for their energy, which Europe is heavily reliant on, in which case they wouldn't be sending it at all. Lisa?
And we'll talk economic impact in about 50 minutes or so with Anna Stewart on this. Let me go back to Nick on that point. Nick, we're talking about the way to target, of course, Russia and Putin and those around him. Nick, talking about sanctions as well, potentially targeting Putin directly. Has that rattled at all, Putin?
No. His spokesman yesterday addressed that straight on. He said, look, this would not be painful in any way, it would be politically destructive. And then he went on to say, and give us some context, that, you know, clearly, he said, people in the West, these Western leaders don't understand the way the Russian system works, that the Russian system at the highest level of government, no one there is allowed to have any large international assets, and therefore the effect of sanctions on individuals, including the president, would not be felt. I think there are many analysts that look at the structures of power, financial influence, financial holdings outside of Russia, of senior people, many analysts who would say that probably is not an accurate assessment, but this is the Kremlin's line. No pain, but politically destructive.
Well, my Secretary Blinken said the ball's now in
Yes,
their
UK
court.
want
We
Nord
shall
Stream
see,
2
Nick,
cancelled,
what
the pressure
Russia
is.
responds to that letter
That's
from
a
guarantees
Russian.
under
That's a
the
pipeline.
that. Nick Robertson, Toronto and Moscow.
I'll have to look up to see where it's supposed to run to.
Thanks very much.
Russia supplies a lot of gasoline. Somebody else is probably going to try to sell them gasoline, but it's probably going to be more expensive. Else they would have probably already done it. I think the U.S. is going to pick up the slack maybe some of them, if it comes to that. But I don't see why it doesn't come out already if this is a really big deal. Why doesn't Germany, for instance, buy U.S. oil instead of Russian oil? Why is the price, I'm sure.
Japan and South Korea remain ironclad. Let's get more on this. CNN will Ripley joins me now. Flight on Taiwan, and will Pyongyang has certainly been
want all eyes to be on their country. They want people to talk about North Korea, even though they're not participating in the Beijing Games, setting the coronavirus pandemic and hostile forces, such as the United States. So the tests that they've carried out, and we don't know for sure yet because we're still going through the numbers, but this could be North Korea's busiest month ever for ballistic missile tests, or certainly at least one of their busiest months ever. They lay out the full spectrum of North Korean weapons capabilities. They've been testing ballistic missiles. They've been testing cruise missiles. Earlier this month, they launched a ballistic missile from a rail car. At the beginning of the month, they tested what they claim are 2 hypersonic missiles that can travel 10 times the speed of sound and have warheads with gliders on them that could cause the gliders to make an unexpected turn, making them almost impossible for existing U.S. Missile defense systems, which are also deployed in Japan, to shoot down. And this is what experts say is so troubling.
It's pretty goofy that these people somehow fail morality tests that the U.S. applies, and then goes on their shit list. And the U.S. in maybe some of the same in different ways as issues
but they are now reaching technical capability where they can make some of those threats real.
Like, would it be that tough for every country on the face of the planet just to say,
These tests are
you're all kind of weird,
law east of North Korea,
why don't we just not fight, not kill each other?
Sanctions, saying in fact they're only going to strengthen
Doesn't seem like that would be that difficult to do.
Those sanctions, even saying that they could restart
And
the kind of testing,
the reality,
testing that we haven't seen since
the fact that it hasn't happened yet, just goes to show how much power these greedy people are that are in power. Know when to sell weapons and when to employ soldiers, killers.
As well as mortgages. The U.S. Federal Reserve, given a rate hike, is likely to come
That's
in
more
March,
important than that.
mostly in an attempt really to get inflation under control. Have a listen to what Jerome Powell said.
Fight.
Supply and demand imbalances related to the pandemic and the reopening of the economy have continued to
World
contribute
according
to
to
elevated
capitalism.
levels of inflation. In particular, bottlenecks and supply constraints are limiting how quickly production can respond to higher demand in the near term. These problems have been larger and longer lasting than anticipated, exacerbated by waves of the virus. While the drivers of higher inflation have been predominantly connected to the dislocations caused by the pandemic, price increases have now spread.
What if there are more dignified people that live in the future?
Two new
What are they going to think about that?
show Americans are struggling with rising prices and don't expect
But yeah, this spooked the stock market today. U.S. inflation Gallup will 79% predict inflation will go up within 6 months. 49% say that should cause hardship or 20 million in the street. It dropped 100 points, 120 points yesterday. Dow. The NASDAQ took an even worse nosedive.
Higher in 2021, growing 5 times faster than the first year of the pandemic.
I'm not sure who, I was thinking, who does raising interest rates help? Just like banks?
$1,600 a month. And Miami leads the way among large U.S.
And why would he just want to help banks? Doesn't that just automatically hurt consumers?
Some of the most popular grocery
You know, if you got to pay more for everything, and it's, you know what I mean? If you have a 10% interest rate on a mortgage or car, compared to a 20% interest rate, there's a huge difference on like your monthly payment and how much you're going to have to pay over the period. So I wonder why he's thinking this and why he's saying this. Maybe they're trying to combat inflation. Raise the interest rate.
One company that doesn't seem to be struggling though is Tesla, the automaker, shook off supply chain issues.
Maybe he has a sweetheart deal with some people who are out there.
Tripled from a year ago at $2.9 billion. The growing appetite for electric vehicles pushed the company's revenue to $17.7 billion. That's up 65% from the year earlier.
I've been looking at electric cars and there's a lot of Tesla charging stations. I think they're free for Tesla owners. There's not a lot of them, but comparatively, compared to the other ones, the non-Tesla ones. I think it's free for Tesla owners, but I think people gotta pay $50.
Stay tuned to find out about the
Charge up.
growing Partygate scandal, why Americans are so angry with Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and how they felt the end of his premiership.
One roll of a lifetime, once.
That's That's what they need. CNN needs a house band. You should hire me. Get a house band. On voice. Find a drummer and a bassist.
Decisions. I can't think of a more important choice the president has to make than a Supreme Court nominee. It's likely going to be a progressive woman. What does that mean for the future direction of our country?
Well, I think that in a lot of ways, because this seat is Justice Breyer's seat, and
White House Biden, the big black woman for
filling that seat, we're not likely to see significant changes in terms of the jurisprudence of the court. Now, what it
I
might
still think
change
he kind of screwed up talking about it like he did with Vice President. I think Reagan was a lot more eloquent when he talked about it. Apparently, he appointed the first Supreme Court female justice.
Any new justice coming in, liberal or conservative,
and he said he's going to take the most qualified woman. And when Biden just says that he's going to pick a black woman for VP or black woman for SCOTUS, he doesn't really
so there's not a lot likely to change in that sense if it's through this nomination.
say any more qualifications.
One of the major points of intrigue yesterday when the story broke was, what if it's tied 50-50 in the Senate? And what if the nominee is one Kamala Harris? And what if one Kamala Harris has to break?
Or at least not in that soundbite.
Well, what do you think about that?
Well, there is this debate going on about whether, in fact, the tie-breaking vote can be. Let's say it was the nominee, wasn't the vice president. Can she even cast a tie-breaking vote as a constitutional matter? There's debate going on about that. My sense is that, in fact, vice president can cast a tie-breaking vote, but we'll have to see how that plays out. The Senate will have to make a decision on that in terms of their own rules of procedure and whether that passes both through the matter of constitutional law. Then the question goes, as you point out, what if she is the nominee? I think that obviously disqualifies her from sitting in that position and casting a vote on herself. And so I think that would actually change the dynamic within the Senate if, in fact, the vice president can cast that tie-breaking vote.
Very interesting. And Jen Psaki said yesterday that President Biden has every intention of running for president, has every intention of the vice president being his vice president again in 2024. But you never know. Stranger things have happened. Jamil Jaffer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The time is now 24 minutes after the hour. Spotify responding to Neil Young's ultimatum
so strange.
on Joe Rogan's podcast.
Seems
We'll
like
tell you what the
hard to believe
company
this is even real.
decided to do.
We both love that story.
Yeah, it's
a great
Spotify.
story.
It's a good story.
Plus, Jimmy Fallon, Congressman Lisa McClain, Jeremy Hunt, this guy named Ryan Toon. Have you heard of this?
I think it's Kennedy.
Yeah, Joe, I don't know. Apparently, like 1960s classic rock for Neil Young wants his music off Spotify if Joe Rogan, the podcaster, actor, comedian, is allowed to broadcast his podcast. Apparently, he has 11 million listeners reportedly. So I don't know. I think it's free speech, and they should keep it all up there. But Neil Young says it's killing people and it's misinformation. But I think that's a stretch. And I think that's actually propaganda. I thought Neil Young came out of the 1960s and like free love and freedom movement and less government, libertarian kind of thing, free speech even, as they're speaking out.
Research shows
Against
that
the Vietnam War and all that.
provides durable protection against the Omicron variant for at least
No, he can't
6
do
months.
this.
But
That's
the
pretty
antibody protection wanes and is 6 times lower after that time. Now Moderna is beginning its next phase of an Omicron-specific booster trial. The company plans to enroll about 600 people in the study. Some participants will have already received
This is interesting. These people are rushing to get an Omicron vaccine.
Pressure is building on Boris Johnson for allegedly violating Britain's COVID lockdown rules. At a contention in somewhat heated session in Parliament, the Prime Minister rejected calls for him to resign over a series of Downing Street parties that allegedly violated the lockdown rules. The tally of alleged parties during lockdown stretches you can see on your screen, from Darwin parties in May of 2020 to Christmas parties to leading celebrations in April of 2021. When, of course, the nation was mourning the death of Prince Philip.
Oh my God.
Investigations are reminding people of the sacrifices they made during their time.
Is that so funny?
Spring 2020. About 2
trippy when I hear about that sometimes.
The death toll mounting so
Quote unquote
quickly.
sacrifices.
Mass graves are dug on the outskirts of London.
I don't know.
The Prime Minister consistently urges the public to abide by COVID restrictions. May 15th, this photo is snapped in the Downing Street garden. Johnson allegedly hosting a wine and cheese party for his team. Johnson's government has denied
Best thing you can do is probably just stay healthy.
claiming this was a work meeting. Bereaved mother Emma Jones
And stay home with your shit.
it's hypocrisy.
Wash your
The
hands.
date of
You know, all
John
the simple
so
things.
the 15th of May, 2020, which is an incredibly sad day for us.
That day, her 18-year-old daughter, Ruby, died of blood cancer at home.
Yeah,
After Ruby died, we opened up our front
It might
garden
not
and
hurt.
invited people to come by,
And we're gonna have
but
a
they had to do it in their household
to get a
bubbles.
vaccine.
Because funeral attendance was severely limited,
I've never
this
looked
is how
inside one,
loved ones said
and I don't
goodbye
trust
to
anybody,
Ruby.
so
You need the
fine, I know
sacrifice
all
of not having a funeral for
look
your
inside
daughter.
of
It
one.
was very, very
With a
hard, but
microscope.
we didn't begrudge that.
I don't see
But
all the
now
ashes
to
sticking in my body.
realise that the people who
Thank you.
set the rules weren't following them is absolutely infuriating.
This government needs to stop
I wouldn't ask somebody else to do
20,
that.
2020, police are out to enforce
I
restrictions
think
and
that
break
is
up
a sign of
illegal gatherings.
responsibility,
Release these
frankly,
glasses, Graham, and drive about your business.
or
In the
altruism,
Prime
right?
Minister's garden, a
Maybe we
party
should come back
is
down to earth
allegedly taking place after his top secretary invited
and
more
really
than
focus on
100
their own
staffers
health
to
and try to
make the most of
keep
the
it very,
lovely
very healthy
weather
if they want to
and
be.
bring your
And
own
not count on other
food.
people to,
Johnson now admits to his
taking
attendance and
drugs
has
or
apologized, but said he believed the
jumping
BYOB
groups to
event
try to
was a
keep
work
germs away
function.
from you.
Mr. Speaker, I want to apologize.
That spring, Olafemi Akinolo followed the rules until his dying breath, isolating at home. His son, Labi, told us,
You have someone who is so dedicated to people he loves. And then the Prime Minister just doesn't care.
in the fall of 2020, Labi met the Prime Minister with other bereaved families to share his story of grief.
I don't think the man can maintain his position as Prime Minister because I think he's betrayed us all so deeply.
For many, the accusation their government broke COVID rules to party is unforgivable. The inquiries into the alleged
Leaving Britain to
breaches
follow the
first
rules
by the
here.
Cabinet Office and now the police are set to make it unforgettable.
Some of the location choices now like the latest in Salma, you know, my heart aches
I don't know why they would be angry.
and Imogen's families. As it's clear, they are angry, they're furious,
because
and they want
if they're
something
grieving, that
to
implies that
happen here.
well,
We are
it's-
waiting for that soon to break the rules which we've been promised for days now. What
So
can we
they're angry
expect?
they
Will
can't
Lauren
take it much of it.
really step down? It seems pretty adamant that he's holding on to the race.
That's the
That's a very good point, and I think you're right. They want something to happen here. What they want to happen here is quite simple. They want the rules that everyone else in this country had to follow, the rules that police enforced, the rules that people got tickets for, had to pay fines as high as £10,000 for. They want those rules to be applied to the people who set the rules.
It's just-
the
it's
very
interesting.
government that set the
It's hard to
rules.
imagine
And
what it
it's
would have been
all
like
been- it's not
to
going
be in
be
another
up to
country
us here.
and have some of these things forced on me. I don't know what would have happened to me if I was in one of these other countries.
To resign after these
I might have-
allegations, but it's all going to
I haven't heard about them jailing people,
There's
so
two
I
bits
don't
of
think
key
that they
information that are going to help
jail
them
me,
make that
per se.
critical decision as to whether or not they continue to support
But you know what I mean?
Boris Johnson,
I wonder
or
if
they take
the way
steps
that a whole lot of
to remove
Americans
the
are
first
behaving
bit of
during this
information,
pandemic,
the
if it
two
would have
grave
warranted
reports, the report,
prison
written by
sentence
the
in
civil
some
servant
countries.
who has for weeks now been looking into these allegations of partying. We expect that eminently. I know I've been saying that for a while, but we really do any day now expect that report to be released. It's supposed to provide that timeline, that blow-by-blow of what happened, who was there, and most critically, what did Prime Minister Boris Johnson know about these parties. I now know newspaper hosts, as soon as we've got the two great reports, we shall bring it to you. Someone got us into that very powerful report. Thanks, Tom. We are learning new details about the federal investigation into Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. Florida's radio host and key witness in the case is now cooperating with the U.S. Justice Department after pleading guilty in a separate rival case. His lawyer says he told investigators what he knew about the allegations against Gaetz, including sexual contact with a minor, sex trafficking, and obstruction of justice. Gaetz has denied all responsibility. Some Some consider it a powerful way to punish Russia if it
I'm not.
invades Ukraine. Experts say it would deal a
I'd like to hear his
painful
rationale or his defense instead of just his
it
denial.
would backfire on the West. We'll explain when we come back. Plus, the U.S. on alert to strong winter weather this week.
And a potential blockbuster snowstorm in the works. Possible nor'easter here and winter weather alerts in advance of it across portions of the Northeast for as much as a foot and a half or more of snowfall in store. To talk about this, exactly where this is all going to play out. Coming up in a few minutes.
I'm also an activist, and I am a spokesperson for people who can't have a voice anymore because of, the censoring and
protesters splatters fake blood at
So I use
Bragg's
my
office.
art to deliver a message that they feel, like that famous quote in that movie, The Network. We are mad
I think
as
Bragg
hell,
is
and we cannot take it. We are not going to take it anymore.
New York
It is
government
absurd.
might be
So yes, my
Scott, I want to get to the
Attorney
statement
General
from Alvin Bragg, the DA that you are
District
protesting.
Attorney.
Here is what he says, quote, amidst this incalculable flood of trauma and loss from the COVID-19 pandemic, violence has spiked across the country. Gun violence in particular span red and blue cities.
You may not be
States with
Republican.
criminal justice reform laws and those without, jurisdictions with progressive prosecutors and those old school conservative DAs. I don't necessarily know if that last part is correct, but you heard him there talk about and blaming all of this gun violence, all of this violence period, on the guns and also on COVID.
He's probably a liberal,
Easy
actually.
way out
Didn't know.
when really all you have to do
Because he's probably appointed by a
is to put
Democrat.
these bad guys back in jail.
Unless he ran. This is
sense.
attorney.
It's that simple. I am sick. We are sick of hearing your thoughts and prayers. Our thoughts and prayers are with you, from the governor to the president of the United States, when they have the power to remove these criminal-loving woke DAs. That is the answer.
They've been talking about this guy for a while.
Object. It'll sit on that table
Fox
for
News
1,000 years
focuses sometimes on like a handful of people that they really don't like for some reason.
And these are the criminals with these rap sheets that people like D.A. Braggs, I'm telling you, they have to be removed. They do not have to change their policies. Their mentality is set in stone. And Governor Hochul, enough with your thoughts and prayers, and get rid of D.A. Braggs and everyone across the country. Get on top of your governors to do the same.
Staying on Hochul for a moment, here's the mayor's new plan to fight crime. Putting more officers on the streets, I think we can all agree that that is vital. Increase gun trafficking detection efforts.
New York is the biggest city in the country, so it's going to have more problems and more crime and whatever else.
Where in there,
Yeah,
though,
more
Scott,
people.
is reversing the dangerous bail reform
Theoretically.
laws that yesterday Kathy Hochul said,
So it shouldn't be
I
shocking.
don't see any evidence that we got to get rid of these. Where's the push on Kathy Hochul to say, Kathy, we got to get rid of these?
It's not going to happen. This politically correct woke thing started a long time.
For whatever reason, sometimes somebody should look up statistics and see over time, over decades, under Republicans and Democrats, if there is more crime under Republicans or more crime under Democrats. But Republicans try to make a case for themselves, saying that when they govern, there is less crime. But there's a lot of things that go into crime and laws, and so it's pretty hard to draw that line. But they don't take a whole lot of time to try to dot all their I's and cross all their T's, and I don't think their viewers do either. They just say it would have a lot of support.
I'm Edith Suarez. If you're just joining us on your Green Update, here's our top story this hour. In a few hours, U.S. President Joe Biden and Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer expected to appear together at a White House event. Breyer is set to announce his retirement, paving the way for a replacement. The White House says President Biden will nominate a black woman in his place as follows. And U.S. and NATO have delivered a written response to Russia over the Ukraine crisis. The document outlines areas of progress for Russia, including arms control, transparency, as well as stability. We'll have much more on those.
I did not know that he said that he's going to do that. But yeah, it makes sense. We haven't had a black woman on
Russian invasion may not be a
the Supreme
military
Court.
weapon at all, in fact. It is being called SWIFT, what it's called, which is a secure network that financial institutions use to move money right around the world. U.S. lawmakers and others have suggested cutting Russia out of the system. and make it nearly impossible for global financial institutions
Today they
to send money
showed
in and out of the country. The move could be a punch in the gut, really.
the old clip of Ronald Reagan appointing the first woman, but they didn't say what her name was.
Did
So I was
warn
going to look it
it
up.
could backfire. Let's get more on this. Anna Stewart
Could be
joins
Ruth.
us now. And
It's not Ruth Bader
now we've
Ginsburg.
been hearing so
And
much
she's a
about
Democrat.
unprecedented sanctions if there's an incursion. But some believe this could be more effective. Talk to us exactly about how swift works here.
Yeah, Vincent, last
Or
night,
she's still alive.
Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said that, again, he and EU leaders are discussing sanctions, but we don't know what is on the table, that this potentially is the most damaging to Russia's economy. SWIFT is essentially what
I had an English friend in high school, and his sister's name was Anna. David Anna Paris.
Now, disconnecting Russia from SWIFT would be
This lawmaker
extreme, and it would have
suggests using
devastating
SWIFT.
consequences, frankly, to the economy, because you could see Tesla
What about
outgoes
SWIFT?
from any
Taylor
firm
Swift?
or bank within Russia
Lawmaker
relying
suggests
on
using
foreign financing. You could see lots of currency volatility, and also in 2014, when this was first really floated, I guess, as an idea relating to the annexation of Crimea, the finance minister then said it would see the economy in Russia shrink by 5%. So this is a really interesting economic tool, but the
US
problem is
lawmakers
the
suggest
potential
using
fallout, both in terms of the financial contagion that you could see. It has been used successfully, for instance, with Iran relating to their nuclear program back in 2012. So Russia's very
I think preemptive sanctions would be absurd, because they haven't done anything wrong.
in terms of financial markets.
Maybe they should take it up to the International Criminal Court.
In Russia, you know,
I think Russia's broken the law.
FBI
Do it that way.
investment value that comes
This is just the hysteria and worrying about it and making proclamations and assumptions isn't going to get anybody anywhere.
Particularly with energy, and the fact of the matter is Russia holds huge power when it comes
I would just not give them any negative attention and then do everything I promised I'd do if they break the law.
25% of oil. So that is the concern.
And they'll probably keep them in check.
You know, a German
Or they'll suffer the consequences.
in a German newspaper last week said, this is the biggest stick,
But they,
but it's not
instead of hearing
necessarily the
a
sharpest.
million other people talk about it, they should talk about it. Russia and Ukraine.
Thinking about it, like you pointed
Talking
out,
to each other.
Anna, Europe probably feels very different to this idea. And it's true that Ron, thanks very much, Anna.
We got to remember that we have the military-industrial complex that is paid over $700 billion,
Strong as a hurricane, snow measured in feet, is headed for part.
and Russia's got one too, and China, basically every country in the world has the same sort of thing going on. So there's an industry that's profiting off of more apparent law possible in every country. They're doing exactly work together.
Some of them do. What's ahead of us? Frontal boundary is setting that into motion here, eventually going to set the stage for the wintry weather we're expecting here. But notice the alerts already in place. Eastern Massachusetts, portions of Rhode Island, the National Weather Service here already prompting these winter weather watches for potentially as much as a foot and a half of snowfall. It's about that amount. But
I think there are actually rational people in every single government that we can talk to about something. If needed.
There comes the frontal boundary. Here comes the
US has
system right off the eastern
those
seaboard.
who the cool
Put
heads
this
are.
together with the colder air back behind this frontal boundary. Here's how it's one of the coldest air masses in years approaching the U.S. That together prompts the potential for wintry weather.
The quivered General Milley talked to in China.
That's still up in the air. Is it going to be close towards the coastline? Is it going to limit the amount of snow showers? Is it going to be too far away? Or is it going to be in that prime zone that we talked about in recent days? The models have had a really tough time here. Gradually, in fact, they've wanted to push this a little farther towards the east. So that placement really was the key. Breaking down the models here side by side, look at the significant variability. In fact, the latest run of the models for the American model almost entirely takes New York out of any potential significance of wintry weather, while the European states firm that will have widespread coverage, especially along the eastern seaboard there along the coast, the highest amounts across portions of Massachusetts. Now, regardless of how much snowfall comes down, we know the winds here are going to be impressive. Storm surge threat going to be very high, and coastal flooding also going to be in place. Of course, with snowfall, you also have blizzard-like conditions. So all of this will be fine-tuned for the next 24 hours.
Ram, thank you very much. Icy weather in Minneapolis, causing accidents, as you can see here. A FedEx truck has lost accident. Police confirmed it collided with another vehicle as they lost control. One of the drivers was but later released. Just 7 miles suffered a bad hit at guardrail after skidding across 2 lanes. No other drivers were. Superfan writes on the show, Prince Andrew wants the jury to decide his fate in a sexual abuse lawsuit. Matt Foster joins us live with the details next.
Prince Andrew has a jury trial. That's fine. Because of his apparent involvement with minor women in sexual encounters. I guess his mom, the royal family, stripped him of his titles and things. And he's suing for that, I think. Yeah. That would be interesting. That'd be awkward too. Because it's kind of like your family excommunicating you and then you say you still want to be in the family. But not exactly too. He's probably suing for damages, not to get his stuff back. Get his titles back. Duke of such and such and whatever. That came responsibilities and payment, I think, too. I'm not sure how much evidence they have about him and his whatever he did. There's a picture they keep showing over and over and over with him and his arm around a young girl. But that doesn't make him guilty of committing a crime. But it looks like there's a whole bunch of people that are guilty of committing crimes with minors and Epstein's property. That's what it looks like.
In January of last year, stating that no ID is required, but there was no way they could verify that somebody was 18 years old, regardless.
It's a new
Why they just
vaccine,
didn't
Greg and
close
Owen,
their
and
age.
unfortunately a controversial one in terms of, who gets to decide if they want it, parents
I got the feeling that
parents or their kids, so you definitely took a stand on this issue. Owen, Greg,
maybe
thank you so much for joining us.
they want a lifelong commitment from virgin women to pleasure these people, so they target a certain limit, if I'm not mistaken. So it looks like, you know what I mean? People that they can keep hiring, or maybe like 20, 30, 100 of them, whatever, and then they would just rotate them in throughout their life over and over, give them gobs of money, so they don't have sex with people. So it looks like that's what
Telling the Wall Street Journal, quote, "We want all the world's music and audio content to be available to Spotify users. With that comes great responsibility in balancing both safety, performances, and freedom for creators." There you have it. Controversial transgender UPenn swimmer Leah Thomas will exclusively share her story in an interview with Sports Illustrated. The New York Times reporting it is unclear when that interview will be released. Thomas has been smashing women's records after becoming eligible to compete in a women's program after using testosterone suppressant. The interview comes as Rice University swim coach Seth Houston lacks the NCAA, telling SwimSwam.com the organization is, quote, bound to one athlete to the detriment of thousands of other athletes potentially. No, it's not a joke. The name of the
It's funny because I was raised in a conservative Christian household and taught to not wear my sexuality on my sleeve, and that sex is personal, private matter, so on and so forth. And I was taught homosexuality was a sin, and I changed, and I think people can have sex with whoever they want to have sex with. But in the same vein, I still have those thoughts about not drawing up all sorts of attention to your sexuality, and it looks like vanity sometimes when people do. Just be whoever you want, whatever you want, but wow, do you really want like your sexuality to be what everybody looks at, talks about, things like that?
That's really a statement of, the scale of Charlie's
Some people are that way. Not many, not a whole lot.
Goes through dozens of points, paragraph by paragraph, really taking all of the allegations that Chief Grace made against him and dismissing them, trying to get the case thrown out. And it's not, then he's going to argue them clearly. Prince Andrew denies that he was a co-conspirator of Epstein, and all the Epstein trafficked girls to him was really the headline from his novels. There are all these other points where he used slightly different terminology. It says the principals say they lack sufficient information to admit or deny the allegations. So really questioning other allegations. And one of the really interesting ones there is the photo, very famous photo of Prince Andrew with his arm around Ukraine, Ghislaine Maxwell in the background. And he says there, you know, it lacks sufficient information for him to admit or deny the allegations, really questioning the authenticity of that photo. He even says, denies the allegation,
which language has a silent S, and that sounds real unusual.
A close friend of his.
What if that's French?
He's using the top legal
I don't know a whole
team
lot of languages.
to go through every single detail
some
of
Greek
all the
and Hebrew and
allegations
English
and
and
trying to
Spanish.
tackle them. And he's clearly really fighting this. Probably not Issa or the royal
Issa
family
might
like
be short
to
for
see.
Issa,
They want this all to
Isabel.
go away. They would probably prefer to have an act for a second one. But there's no suggestion that he's going for that.
That's how you pronounce the I's.
Thank you very much. He's going on the attack here. Matt
Spanish.
Foster for us in Dubai. Great to see you, Matt. Parents in Delhi say enough is enough when it comes to pandemic disclosure.
The implications are, I would say, catastrophic.
Campaign underway to reopen Delhi schools.
Introducing the all-new Gillette Lash with exfoliating bar. It combines shaving and gentle exfoliation into one efficient stroke, where a shave is quick and easy as washing your face.
I wonder if India used it for the hydroxychloroquine because they're the ones that sold tons of it to Donald Trump. I wonder if they've used it as a treatment for COVID. I kind of don't think they did. Or they do. Or if they do, it's not a mainstream, but an alternative therapy treatment. Because the drug was developed for something else, and they use it for that purpose. And I got the impression that they sold it to the U.S. after doing some testing on it, and they knew that it didn't really work that well. But I think Trump just wanted to buy a whole bunch of it anyway. Maybe they hoodwinked them. Or they just, yeah. I think they focused on the few cases where it looked like it was working. Well, in my opinion, I just heard Donald Trump say he's going to run for president, and I thought, hoped, maybe I was in denial that he was going to run again, because he was on the golf course and he said he's going to be the 47th president yesterday, so it means he's going to have to run. I'm actually shocked. I thought he just wanted a whole bunch of power and attention and that he would anoint somebody like play Kingmaker kind of thing. But no, I'm starting to get a different picture of him now. And if he's that intent on winning it back, it's going to be real, real weird. But I think comedians are licking their chops and bracing themselves. Because it's kind of like when there's a sequel, the sequel always has to really outdo the original, or nobody watches it. And I think we're going to see the same thing here. It's going to be real, real strange. But I don't even know how they could pull out all the stops. What that would mean to him and his party. I don't know if he's scheming and what they're going to plan. You know, I think a lot of it comes down to money. If they dump enough money into advertisements, they end up swinging opinions and voters. So, they try to all do it on the cheap and only spend the money in the districts and the states where they need the votes to win. And just spend as much money as they have to and not a penny more. But people like Donald Trump and whoever else in the Republican Party have the millions of dollars if they want to invested into swing states and purple states and try to get all those votes. Like we do.
India, there's a push for schools in Delhi to reopen. They've been closed almost all of the pandemic, with students missing hundreds of days of in-person learning. And now some parents are stepping up to campaign to get children back to class. Vedika Sood is live for us in New Delhi this hour. And Vedika, put this into context for us. I mean, Vedika, how long have children been out of school here?
Well, according to parents who actually signed a petition and handed over a memorandum to the Deputy Chief Minister of Delhi, their children have been out of school for almost 600 to 650 days since the outbreak of the pandemic, which means they've barely been to school, Lisa. And this is especially for the younger children and students who have missed out on at least 6 days of school, according to a petition that these parents have filed with the Delhi government. They have about 1,600 signatures of parents on there.
Delhi used to be India used to be a
to open schools once again.
English protectorate or colony, whatever they call it. So it's interesting. At this hour they're broadcasting stories that they don't later when they focus on US.
UNESCO, India is one of the countries leading the list when it comes to the longest time away from
India has some real big
offline
problems.
school, which means being in school physically and learning from teachers.
They don't even have good
and
infrastructure like sewage and clean rivers and things like that.
with other friends and community, and
And you think that would be the priority
better than
of
being
any
on
country.
online classes, which has been an impediment for many
That
to
just people
understand
don't
the
get
process
sick
of
in their own
education according to
ways.
experts. We've spoken to
You can't do
parents,
that,
they
then I
have
don't know what to
mentioned a
do.
lot of challenges that their
I think they've
children
got
are
nukes, so
facing.
you think they would
Let's
fix the
listen
sewage
to one
before
of
they
the
use
petitioners
the
who's
nuke.
also a parent in this case.
People bathe in these rivers for religious reasons and then they catch diseases like COVID. Whether they literally catch it from the river itself or from the people that are there, who knows? Or both. But it's pretty disgusting and it's unfortunate.
On Wednesday,
And it's pretty strange.
in Delhi were
They've got
reported to
all
be
these,
almost 7,500
frankly,
cut back
with all due
to a
respect,
few
all
weeks
the
ago, Lisa. It stood at
gods and
over
religious
20,000.
nonsense.
These parents are now saying let our children go back to school, at least start a hybrid system, if nothing else. Lisa.
Yeah, but because 600 days is a long time, and the
Well,
impact, of course, it has on their mental health. Appreciate you being with us, but it's put there for us in New Delhi. 400 years ago, the mere
It's like glorified stretching
of
out.
witchcraft was enough to get someone hanged or burned at the stake. Thousands of men, women, and children died in Europe as a result of the witch hunt. The vast majority of these victims were women. Now, efforts are underway across Europe to address this historic wrong. In northern Spain, Catalonia, where persecution was especially severe, the parliament in Catalonia has voted to free the hundreds of people and just
Catalonia's parliament pardons hundreds of people.
So might be
Kansas City
generous
Chiefs
after
fans
he won big against the Buffalo Bills Sunday night. A children's hospital in Buffalo, New York, says it's received $13 donations from the thousands of Kansas City supporters as a
I'm gonna call it quits.
The total has reached more than $250,000.